of everything that exists on the earth, the most improbable and the most intriguing phenomenon is human being. 7 billion humans today living on earth. We are forming a magnificent piece, a masterpiece of my own life. And all of them together form a masterpiece of humanity.
Can you hear?
There has been a long genetic river that has flown on the earth. What is its nature? What is its purpose? What has been our destiny? Where do we come from? Do we know everything that happened with us? Maybe there were some other reasons of our existence. Maybe we came from other stars. We are going to explore everything that this magnificent genetic river has done and discover the meaning of us humans on Earth. If we for a moment could stop our daily life and look around at the faces that we are so used, so accustomed, we would discover that actually we have every one of the faces that surround us are different. It is different as much as we can find them on the streets, in the restaurants, in railroad stations, all over the place. And if we can take ourselves out a little bit of the traditional living of customs that we are used to and be in a place like this maybe, then we would realize there are 6 billion people on the earth that are actually living and expressing the human nature, expressing the human consciousness. Each one of them is carrying what humanity is all about. And now we are beginning to wonder, what is my great genetic river that has flown before me? When we are talking about inheritance, there is a tradition and belief to think that it is the blood that transfers the characteristics from generation to generation. He has my blood, she has grandfather's blood. It is not the blood that transfers the inheritance, it's the DNA. The blood does not have the capacity to do it. We know biologically that we are a vertebrate that has red blood cells without the nucleus that carries DNA. It is a DNA that has that particular task, the molecule that transfers the characteristics from generation to generation.
All Americans are immigrants. Even the Native Americans, the indigenous people, are immigrants at one point or another. So I think that all of us have this hunger in us to know where we came from, to jump the pond, as we call it in genealogy, to get across that ocean and know where our ancestors came from and what brought them to America. We teach you to find your way back to the shore here in this country. So it leads us back to our ancestors. It helps us to reach out to them across the pond.
The story of the immigrants is written down in the history of people and nations, and the genetic journey further back is told by the magical molecule of DNA that carries the design of life. The genetic travel back into the deep past of every individual. Centuries, millennia, hundreds of thousands of years back is written in the DNA.
This is a model of DNA, of a portion of DNA. It's the famous double helix. It looks almost a little bit like a spiral staircase. It has these two backbones, which are made up of phosphate and a particular kind of sugar, and these steps are pairs of bases. In DNA, there are 4 bases. There's adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine in a particular sequence. That particular sequence is the genetic code. It contains the instructions by which the cell is able to do all of the business that the cell has to do. About maybe 1.5% of the DNA is the genes.
Every individual has a totally unique DNA pattern. This can be considered as a DNA fingerprint by which a person can be identified. And this is applied in many new fields. For example, in searching human ancestry or finding diseases associated with the DNA, even for determining the races of domestic animals. If you don't know whether your pet is a purebred animal, a DNA test might reveal it. The DNA fingerprint also is an important tool in criminology for identifying individuals committing a crime.
The field of genetics is almost terrifying. I often tell my wife that medical ethics is going to be a growth industry because of all the things we're now doing, like cloning, for instance, is going to be a problem. But it's rapidly becoming possible now, and I think probably in the next few years you will be able to basically get your entire DNA profile. You'll be able to walk in a doctor's office or a laboratory, and for a relatively minor amount of money, you will be able to get your entire DNA profile so that all the bases will be given to you. And once we have that, and then we can look and see, oh yes, you're susceptible to this disease, you're susceptible to that disease, no, you're not susceptible to this disease. And then it becomes terrifying because at that point you're completely wide open. You know, you, in a sense, even know your future.
You will find this DNA in every cell in the body that has a nucleus. And DNA can be tested by taking the nuclear material from any cell in the body. One of the easiest kinds of cells from which to collect the DNA is the cells that make up the lining of the cheeks.
In 1976, Alex Haley published a book, Roots, a saga of an American family, that started a popular movement among African Americans for searching their genetic roots in Africa. To discover one's ancestors soon became a popular theme for all Americans, and it is growing in popularity in many other countries. Currently, the Institution of African Ancestry uses modern genetic methods for tracing the ancestors of anybody who is interested in searching for his or her genetic past. That includes not only a few past generations, but can also trace the individual's genetic river tens of thousands of years back.
The mission is to transform the way people view themselves, and we do that using DNA. Our process is one that uses DNA to determine what part of the world a person shares ancestry with. Tell someone where their maternal ancestry was anywhere from 500 to 10,000 years ago. We can also do that for paternal ancestry. And so it's a very exciting time that we're able to use technology to answer the question of where am I from?
A couple years ago, and I'm not really quite sure when, but the idea of looking at deep ancestry came up. And here we're talking about the same thing, Y chromosome testing, but also added what is called mitochondrial testing. And this is DNA testing to look and see, for instance, where your ancestors were thousands of years ago. Because we know that man originated in Africa. And we know that they moved, humans moved out of Africa and spread throughout Asia, Australia, Europe, and then eventually North and South America. And as humans left Africa, their DNA would change periodically. Once that change occurs, it's permanent. So you can analyze someone's DNA, for instance, the Y chromosome or the mitochondrial DNA, look for these changes in the bases, and track man's progress back to Africa.
The majority of the people that take our tests are African Americans. However, we've had people from all over the world use our service to trace their ancestry. And what's interesting is that while most of the time we find African ancestry, sometimes we don't find African ancestry. There was a gentleman who took our test in Pittsburgh and actually traced his paternal line to China. And he was an African American man, never thought he had any Chinese ancestry. And so we were a little alarmed, you know, we thought, how are we gonna, he's not gonna believe us, this is completely out of left field. But when he got the results, he actually was quite calm and started to think about how he had studied Eastern religions his entire life. His home was decorated with all kinds of Asian influences. He even named his daughter China. And, you know, didn't know why he was drawn to this culture. And so perhaps that cellular memory that we talk about influenced the way he viewed the world. The process of tracing ancestry is pretty straightforward. We each inherit 50% of our DNA from our mother and 50% from our father.
In addition, there is another kind of molecule, a special molecule called mitochondrial DNA, that is transmitted only from the mother to her descendants, boys or girls. Thus, the mother is a very important link to determine the long and complicated lines of where our ancestors came from.
What we do is we look at that mitochondrial DNA because, quite like a census record or marriage records or birth records, it gives us some information about your maternal line. And so we unlock the code, if you will, of that DNA to determine ancestry.
To make things even more intriguing, an exclusive father-son line of inheritance is carried by one component of the DNA called the Y chromosome. This tells us exclusively about the male lineage of the human genetic river.
There's a lot of interesting things that have sort of fallen out. For instance, the Genghis Khan, and they found that certain changes in the Y chromosome were found very frequently in males throughout Asia. And they believe that it was based on the fact that Genghis Khan fathered a lot of sons, who then fathered a lot more sons. If you want to know that if you're distantly related to Genghis Khan, you can submit your DNA testing and they will tell you.
The Jewish history tells us about the priestly tradition of Cohen as descendants of Aaron, or Aharon HaKohen, the older brother of Moses. About 3,000 years ago, he was designated as the high priest in the Temple of Solomon. Cohen is a Hebraic singular for priest. Genetic studies of the male line of descendants of the Kohanim, Cohen, have confirmed that indeed there is what could be called a Cohen gene that is found in the Ashkenazi as well as Sephardic lineages and transmitted along the father-son genetic line. Thus, the inherited priestly tradition is written, or should we say confirmed, in the lineage by the DNA inheritance. country to country, we find that there was always something very important that took place that changed the history and also the flow of people inside or outside the countries. And in this case, we find that there are many places in the United States, in South America, in Europe, in Asia and Africa that tell us here indeed have passed by genetic rivers that tell of things that have happened and things that are going to happen in the future. Many times we found that memorials that have been erected for important people or important events might tell us the story also from a genetic rivers. And now we are in front of Lincoln Memorial, considered as one of the most precious person who made the genetic rivers flow in new direction. In many cities, there are great centers of energy. The founding fathers of the United States, most of them were Masons, they designed this line that started from the Congress, passing the obelisk of George Washington and finishing at Lincoln Memorial. It is there where the true energy of United States is. The arrival of new people, new ideas, new cultures in the country invite to integrate the genetic diversity and use the human divine energy for applying it for cooperation, compassion, and love to all nations of the world. This would propel the flow of the human heritage to a new height, as was the dream of the founding fathers written on the $1 bill of the United States. Novus ordo seclorum, new order for generations or centuries. And it is the turn now to reopen that line of power and open it in a way so that it becomes positive, it becomes constructive, and so that the power enters with love into the nation of the world. Evening in New York, where we are here together. All the genetic rivers have come together. Tourists and people from all the world. Look around me. All over the place, wherever you look, there are human genetic rivers that have come together. This is the splendor of humanity as it has produced one of them so many exciting cultural realities. We are here to witness the most splendorous togetherness of what human rivers are. One of our tasks is to learn about our deep past that is sometimes concealed in ruins and remnants of old civilizations. They can tell us about the time and the ways how the humanity flowered before our time. Searching for human genetic rivers, very frequently we cannot find where they are, and yet we can reach a place like in Machu Picchu here, where the human greatness left behind a culture, a civilization, a consciousness that is part and parcel of the great flow of human genetic rivers. It is our task to ask for them. It is our task to explore what they represent to us today. And as much as they are ruins, they are also a living memory, or a memory that we can extract from that what they have left behind. Human genetic river has penetrated, going backwards, into many cultures, many civilizations, occupied mountains and deserts, and all parts of the world. In Machu Picchu, in the strength of this particular place, there have been marvels that the human genetic river has accomplished. New signs are suggesting that a new humanity is emerging. And for that, we have to reassess quite dramatically the way that we are thinking about humanness, about humanity in all that exists today on our earth. And it seems that there are two great rivers that we can identify in today's world. One is the human genetic river, and the second is the river of human consciousness. Both of them are weaving and coming together, and all are precipitated in each individual person. And with that, we have to go into the future. Let us read the stones and ask them what they can tell us about all the things that we would like to find out. A stone that we find in Pisac in Peru, several cultures seemingly that have been mixing together. There are the white lines that are like genetic rivers that have flown on and on. And then they are like orangey, yellowish, new ways of living, new ways of existing. And I wonder if cultures also have been that way. Whereas the genetic rivers have continued their flow, the cultures have flourished, and then they have disappeared again. How many human genetic rivers have flown through these temples, through these old fortresses of the Inca? In Sacsayhuamán, near Cuzco, this is the most magnificent temple that was produced by different peoples from ancient times, mobilized by the Incas. And now we are traveling through them, wondering what have been the genes, what have been the genetic rivers, where did they come from, what was their experience. And in some ways we could also think that perhaps, just perhaps, some of our genes have been incorporated as an experience in constructing and living and expressing the greatness of the Inca Empire. In the archaeological site of Chinchero, Peru, we found a magnificent example where the Inca tradition is mixed with the Spanish tradition. Upon the foundation of the Incas, the Spaniards constructed temple, and this integrates the two different cultures, two different lineages, the tradition of the genetic rivers of Incas and the genetic river of the Spaniards. And they have been blended together in this place that gives us an evidence that indeed two cultures mix, and the human genetic river continues its flow. A remarkable place where we can learn about the German and European immigration to the New World is the German Immigrant House of Bremerhaven. Its director, Simone Eich, offered us the hospitality for exploring the stories of the departures and arrivals of this remarkable human genetic river.
We always are on a way of migration. As we see this migration place here, how people from Germany went to the States and they dared their life just to get food or some sort of future or a hope. The word river is a reality, what we can see outside here, but the word river is as well a myth. A myth that means the genetic river is related to a biographical river. It's related to the Lebensfluss, as we say in German, the river we all, as individuals and as community, we are sailing down, sailing from birth to death. And on this road and on this river, we have a lot of experience. It's a creation of dreams and disappointment as well, of desperate and hope. So what comes together in this word, genetic river, is the ongoing living process of human beings and of all living systems. So biography of an individual is like a river. We start and we end, and we never know where we end. To construct your biography means to be part of the genetic river, to be part of social and culture, and to make your special individual life. And every human being is repeating the whole story of mankind, is some sort of like a drop in the big river.
The most extraordinary example of mixture of the genetic rivers, we can find in Ellis Island in New York Harbor in the United States. It was the place where about 12 million people arrived from other continents, coming from different parts of the world. And as they arrived, they were seeking completely a new world, a new way of living. And at the same time, they begin to live together in a way that they were not able to do it in their own countries. Arabs and Jews today live together, Protestants and Catholics from the Irish Kingdom, and many other groups came and began to understand that there is one large genetic river, and that one large genetic river is humanity. In some ways, we could think of this great mixture of genes in the United States, particularly in New York, as a great experiment of the Mother Earth to invite people to establish a melting pot of nations, of groupings, of genes, and through that begin to learn something that perhaps humanity has to learn for the future of a new humankind. We all represent one genetic river of humanity that is flowing together on the earth.
So all life is to create places for hope. That means we have to be in the present. Even we have a past and we hope of a future. But the main thing is to create the present. A gene doesn't develop itself. It needs an opportunity. We need support of Mother Earth, of the sky, of the stars, of the light, of the energy, of people around us who loves us or who hate us, and then we have to fight for our life.
In accordance to the American cell biologist Bruce Lipton, DNA is not just a mechanical repetition of gene sequences to run the business of the cell, but acts almost like a living organism itself. It responds to all kinds of outside and inside influences and can actually be modified by them. Reading what's happening around the cell, this maverick molecule takes care of its own needs and that of the cell in which it lives. It serves to the cell as its tiny living home. DNA depends on the world around it and thus forms an integral part of the great flow of life.
So I think the genetic river is a biographical river as well. It's a cultural river, a social river, and they all come together worldwide. And this is so great to see in this museum some sort, a part of this, how it fits together.
We are entering now what is called the Casa de Colonos. That is a house that was established in Petrópolis, Brazil, where many of the German immigrants arrived here and established the house in 1845. This house was built in a way so that German immigrants could come here and establish their ways of living. And they brought their own culture, their own ways of life. And later from Bremerhaven, from the immigrant house in Germany, many more have come in here and more of the genetic diversity was established in Brazil by the many, many immigrants that arrived here and produced what today is Brazil. In this Imperial Museum in Petrópolis, Brazil, there are evidences of long genetic rivers that have flown from Portugal into Brazil. It is the story of the Emperor of Portugal who decided to go into Brazil to establish his empire. As in the noble houses of Europe, the chart of inheritance of the Portugal's emperors is telling us about their history, how they lived, what they accomplished, and everything else that is included in the genetic flow of the family tree. we wonder, where will the genetic rivers flow? And human consciousness, what new adventures, what new ways will it find on the way? The science, technology, cosmology, quantum physics, all of them somehow are revealing to us a completely new picture, how this universe functions and how we are placed in it. The visible universe actually is an empty space. And the whirling subatomic particles that are around there, they create images that we are perceiving as our world, as our matter. But it is an empty space. Perhaps the Creator is still busily creating the new universe. It is a continuous creation. I wonder, is the Creator doing something new and it is a continuous creation that is taking place and we with our human consciousness are participating in that? Or is it really so that the universe is created by the Creator and the Creator is the universe? Where will the invisible universe flow? Where will the genetic rivers flow? What new ways, what new adventures humanity will see in the future? If there is anything really magical and incomprehensible in life, it is the molecule of DNA. All our inheritance rides on this tiny chemical string of atoms. We well might call it the molecule of life, and it is the only molecule of life. We saw that this little bit of chemistry carries the blueprint of all life. Every cell in our body carries this blueprint. What it means is that every one of our cells knows how we look like. If we take a sample from our cheek, as Professor John Gillen mentioned earlier, and if we could talk to the DNA, it would describe exactly how we look like. The color of our eyes and skin, shape of our hair, hands, feet, nose, and the rest of our body. What it also means that we all are biological holograms. That is, every part of me, mind you, our body is made up of cells, carries the blueprint and knows how the totality of me looks like. As we know, the genetic code of DNA is actually guiding the production of a new human being, like me. But that tells us only a small portion of what the DNA does in the cell. On a bigger picture, as every living being has a DNA blueprint of itself, humans, animals, plants, we can speak not only of the human genetic river, but of the enormous genetic stream of life on Earth to which we also belong. In addition to the remarkable scientific work of describing the human genome, that is, all the genes that we as humanity have, the cutting-edge research has penetrated deeper and deeper into the nature of this enigmatic molecule and what else it does. Let us look at these totally new and different capacities that this molecule of life has. We have discovered that life in itself emits light. That light is produced or generated by the DNA that all organisms have. A barely perceptible light, and these are photons, as we would call them biophotons, photons that are little particles of light that are emitted by the body. German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp described the biophotons, the units of light that in their particular way generate energy emissions and oscillations that might have a special role in the living world. That light apparently is used by the DNA as means of communicating. What do we mean by that is that the DNA is communicating not only with the DNAs within our body, but it is communicating with DNAs in other bodies. Therefore, when we are together, our DNAs talk their own language in a way that is almost magical to perceive. We not only communicate from human to human, we are communicating with whole life on Earth. Why? Because DNA is contained not only in our body, it is present in all living organisms, animals and plants. Two Russian scientists, Pyotr Gardyayev and Vladimir Poponin, and their linguistic colleges of the Russian Academy of Sciences have made the perplexing discovery that DNA not only communicates with each other, but stores information and much more. Their research with DNA using laser light in vacuum have produced an enigmatic presence of DNA after it was removed. In short, the absence of DNA, the field acted as if the DNA was still there. In biology, it's called the phantom DNA effect. These disturbing DNA presences might be producing what in physics is called magnetized wormholes. They are thought of as tunnels of connection for communication between distant areas in the universe outside the space and time. Thus, it is an instantaneous. The instant communication of DNA requires the existence of an intriguing, not yet known dimension or matrix, in which energies are transmitted beyond the electromagnetic field where our energy communication is happening. Greg Braden and several more thinkers exploring the new ideas integrating science and spirituality are proposing precisely such a new dimension for energy flow and communication, calling it the matrix or the divine matrix. This unknown dimension well might be of a spiritual material nature. That would also confirm the existence of the morphogenetic field described by the heterodox British biologist Rupert Sheldrake. His proposal that well might involve the DNA hypercommunication describes the existence of a new field where communication and learning are facilitated in a dimension beyond the electromagnetic field. Is it possible that our DNA gathers information from the outer space and sends it to our consciousness or our subconsciousness? Perhaps DNA helped us to have languages. Studying the sequences of the DNA bases, so to say its letters and sentences, the Russian linguists came to quite a revolutionary conclusion. That following certain known rules of language or grammar, as it is known in human languages, the DNA apparently uses it for communicating in a language of its own. As all DNA are built the same way, it is the universal DNA language. It might be possible that humans could develop language because the DNA had it built into its fundamental makeup in the first place. In a mysterious way, everybody and everyone communicate with everyone, no exceptions. That, as a consequence, goes much further even. That means we are constituting a great quantum, as David Bohm suggested in the quantum physics. The universe or the cosmos is one great quantum, one great unit within which everything interacts and is interdependent with other things.
Can you hear the voice of the children?
Here we are in Central Park in New York. People are passing by, there are trees around, there are plants, there are animals that are in the lake. But we realize that at this moment, we are a great unity of life, because everything that is contained here is really a DNA stream, that great stream of life, that great unit of life that we represent as human beings on Earth.
Reaching high.
And that in itself is something extraordinary, because I am the one who carries the human experience at this moment as it has come all the way, let us say, from the beginning of humanity. Now, we can look at ourselves individually, what we are, how we are, and we realize that I am the only universe that exists in the world. We know the other universes also exist, but I feel only I am existing. Now, the interesting part of that is, in my genetic river, I am unique. I am a unique individual because nobody else has that particular genetic makeup that I have. Are totally unique individuals, each one of them. What does it mean? What I can contribute to the continuation of human species is unique. No one else can do that for me. And maybe that gives us a new sense. What I am, who am I, and what can I do? As it turns out, actually, my contribution to the evolution is also unique. No one else can do that for me. Therefore, we are much more than we think we are in terms of humanity. It goes beyond who am I individually, it goes into understanding I, that is we the humanity.
Can you hear the voice of the children?
Whenever we look at what are we doing here on the earth, we realize that there are two great rivers that humanity has produced. The first one is the human genetic river that we have been talking about, and the second is the river of human consciousness. The moment that humanity appeared on the earth, there was also the human consciousness that has traveled, and they have traveled hand in hand. As a matter of fact, they are one and the same river. It started producing cultures, civilizations, new ways of looking at the environment. Each one of us, each one of the over 6 billion people that are on the earth have participated in the great process in which the evolution continues. Therefore, I am rich or poor, wise or dummy, educated or not educated, in every one of them, the human consciousness has been that invisible player that has given, so to say, the direction, where to go and what to do. At this moment, I am that cutting edge that produces the continuation of civilizations, of cultures, of knowledge, and everything else. We are the cutting edge of human consciousness that continues into the future, or that creates the future. We are the creators of the future.